The National Growth Areas Alliance represents councils around the outskirts of Australia's capital cities. Population growth is at least double the national average and infrastructure investments is historically low. Growth areas are diverse and dynamic. They are cities, suburbs and towns. They encompass expansive greenfield development and they are home to more than 5.2 million people. They are the epicentre of cultural diversity in Australia and they have huge potential to drive economic recovery. As we recover from a turbulent few years, National Growth Areas Alliance is highlighting two reasons why we need an urgent federal government focus on growth areas, and we're calling for 4 priority actions. Reason 1. Unequal COVID impact on growth areas. COVID has not affected all Australians equally. Growth areas have been hit the hardest, with more essential workers who have to leave home to go to their place of work each day, exposing themselves and their families to greater risk of virus transmission. They return to larger households and they have less access to GPs and other vital services. The growth areas of Sydney and Melbourne experienced Australia's largest COVID outbreaks. Governments need to join the dots between high COVID rates, high outbreak risk factors, and the lag in social infrastructure in fast-growing outer suburbs. Growth areas will take the longest time to recover from the impact on people, communities, and economies, but they also offer the greatest opportunities for increased jobs and productivity. Reason 2. Growth areas are still growing and another population boom is imminent. Australia's population growth has not stalled everywhere. Growth areas are still growing despite the wider national turndown. Intrastate migration and continuing high birth rates mean that growth areas are still growing at twice the national average. HomeBuilder has created the highest ever levels of building approvals in growth areas. This is setting up a future population boom that will be up to 3 times the current levels within the next 2 to 5 years, even without inwards migration recommencing. Action 1. A Minister for Growth Areas. An urgent national response to growth area inequities and COVID recovery needs to be led by a Minister for Growth Areas at the national federal level. All of our infrastructure advisory bodies have called for special attention to growth areas, and this needs national coordination. The new Growth Areas portfolio is in recognition of the more than 5 million Australians who live in outer urban growth areas and the millions more who depend on them for their work and their industries. The suburbs and cities in growth areas are a vital national asset, yet they are largely overlooked in cities policy. Better planning and investment that supports distributing infrastructure, jobs and housing more evenly across the entire metropolitan area is long overdue. Action 2. Infrastructure to transform. There is a new looming infrastructure crisis in growth areas created by HomeBuilder, which has seen record building approval rates in all growth area LGAs. This unplanned and uncoordinated exponential growth in land sales will see development occur long before vital infrastructure is planned and funded, let alone delivered. If we don't learn from the population boom of the last decade and the resulting social inequities that the pandemic has highlighted, vast new populations will find themselves without access to the transport, health, education, employment and community infrastructure all Australians are entitled to. Existing funding and financing mechanisms at federal and state level will not meet this demand. a financing mechanism to secure current and future infrastructure delivery, and a strong role for national and state infrastructure bodies are the long-term solutions we need, not more ad hoc infrastructure project announcements. Action 3. Revitalise Australia's economic engine room. Growth areas are one of Australia's key economic assets, with a 2.2 million strong workforce, large tracts of land ready to transform into industrial, manufacturing and high employment zones, and a strong track record of business growth. A growth areas-led economic recovery needs a two-pronged approach. Open up opportunities for new jobs and support small and medium-sized business. Funding employment infrastructure and business support programs in growth areas will support hard-hit small businesses and embed local workplaces, bringing new jobs closer to where the growing population lives. We need a focus on growth area jobs and local economies, with incentives for new industries to establish in growth areas to benefit from the competitive advantage and potential of a vast local workforce and ample land. Action 4. Community recovery and resilience in Australia's heartland. Growth areas are the heartlands of our cities. They are populated by the people who get up every day to do the essential work that keeps the nation running. Our communities lost the most loved ones during the pandemic and battled through the highest infection rates. Our communities bore the brunt of bushfires and floods. We can't let this keep happening. Recent natural disasters and COVID have shown us that improving local access to health services, and particularly mental health services, is critical. We need to respond to the diverse cultural and language needs of our communities and provide health and education services and facilities that build community cohesion. As our communities grow, so do the demands on community infrastructure. Sport, cultural and creative expression are central to our nation's cultural identity and a local sense of community and belonging. This sort of infrastructure is vital in strengthening the social fabric of growing communities and is drastically underfunded in growth areas.